I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and behind me is the new 5-seat version of the Jeep Grand Cherokee, the short wheelbase version of this car that has just launched here in Australia. Now, here at Chasing Cars, where I work, we're owned by Budget Direct, which is one of the big insurance companies here in Australia, and that means that unlike so many sites and channels, we're not beholden to car manufacturer advertising, and that's why I'm able to tell you that the 2023 Grand Cherokee is simply overpriced, and that tends to wash out so many of the things that this American-made SUV gets right. But the good news is that Jeep could fix this with a new approach to pricing for its semi-premium SUV. Now, I say semi-premium because there appears to be some confusion here that the Jeep Grand Cherokee is a luxury vehicle, which it isn't. And in this video today, I'm going to point out exactly why that is the case. What it is semi-premium. It should be competing against vehicles that are about $20,000 cheaper than this car, and I'm going to explain my rationale for that call in today's video. We're also going to check out the interior of this car, of course, the back seat, the boot. We'll discuss the running costs, which are quite high because of the old school non-turbo petrol V6 that this SUV uses. Then we'll go for a drive and see what the Grand Cherokee gets right and what it doesn't get right and needs to be improved in the future. But lastly, I'm going to tell you how you can save money on the Grand Cherokee. If you decide that you really like this American-built SUV, you want to buy one, but you actually want to make sure you get the best value for money, I do have a tip, and that'll be in my verdict at the end of this video. But before we get started, hit subscribe down below. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. So hopping into the Grand Cherokee starts with the door, which is normal, but that door feel and sound is just a little thin actually, particularly compared to other cars that'll cost you 111 grand drive away, which is exactly how this Overland with the optional package is sitting right here. So I want to talk about whether it feels like a car that should cost $111,000 drive away, because that's strong money. This car is in a zone where you can get like a strongly optioned Volkswagen Touareg, Lexus RX, or if you need that off-roading capability, Ford Everest Platinum for a lot less, Toyota Prado Kakadu for a lot less. So it's difficult, really. This is a dangerous spot, I reckon, in terms of pricing for this car. So does it feel up to scratch? Well, some bits do. We've got Nappa leather on the seats, it's pretty nice. Nappa here on the steering column, Nappa on the doors, Nappa on the dash, and it's all stitched and looks and feels nice, but it's a bit of a veneer of luxury here in the Grand Cherokee because it takes almost no time at all. I mean, you already heard the door, to find bits that feel a lot thinner and not up to a six-figure price. That starts here, where your leg comes to rest. If you've got even slightly long legs, you find you're up against this nasty hard piece of plastic that would have been so easy just to cover in some vinyl or something like that to make it a bit more plush. And the whole thing just moves around, which is awful, as does this A-pillar, which sort of vibrates as you're driving, actually, and you can see the free play in it. I don't know if this, I mean, they've been building 5-seat Grand Cherokees in the States for years now, including in this generation. So these sorts of kinks should have been ironed out a long time ago. Then you sort of see this gray wood. It looks really nice. I love a bit of wood in a car, but it's just a veneer. It's literally a veneer. It's not real. Most rivals at this price would either give you real aluminium, or if it's wood, it's kind of open pore. Cars like the Volvo XC90, Audi Q7, Volkswagen Touareg just have that richer, more polished interior at this price. And even though Jeep have thrown Nappa, optional massaging chairs, all that jazz at it, it doesn't cover up that this is pretty much a mainstream SUV. I'm sorry, it's hard to make the case that it's a proper luxury vehicle. Now, moving on, the seats themselves, they've got 16 ways of adjustment if you go for the optional pack. They're reasonably comfortable. They're not that supportive, if I'm completely honest. Cars like the Q7 and XC90 will give you that longer support or better support over long distance. The technology though, it's pretty good. Uconnect is easy to work with. Wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, rock solid connection. You got built-in nav. The digital gauges, they're clear enough. You can customize them, but it just feels a little generic and lacking polish. And some of the fonts in the screen are tiny. They're really hard for anyone to read, even me with my young eyes. And then there's some interesting problems with fonts. Most of the interior has the same font. I know this is nerding out, but you know, a luxury car should have consistency. The font is the same across all the buttons except one, the start-stop button, which has this weird text type that doesn't appear anywhere else. Why is that a parts bin special and not a consistent text type? I don't know. Now, weirdly, even though this is the nicest of the 5-seat Grand Cherokee specs, the Overland, it doesn't get the Macintosh stereo that you can get on the 7-seater in Summit Reserve trim. That's a bit of a shame. The Alpine doesn't sound all that great, but love the big sunroof, lets a lot of air in. You've got physical buttons for most controls, like all of the climate, your cooled seats, your heated seats, heated steering wheel, that's all there. And there's plenty of storage. Wireless charging, bizarrely optional. Big cup holders for your Starbucks, and then multi-tiered box here between the seats, big door bins. You know, it works pretty well. I just don't think it feels like a 100 grand car, let alone a 111 grand car. Now, just like rivals such as the Touareg or the Lexus RX, the Jeep Grand Cherokee is a big 5-seater. You can go for the L model if you want a small third row in the back as well, but here in 5-seat form, you know, it's nice and big in the back. I've got the driving seat adjusted into my position. Adjusted like that, you can see the room back here is amazing. Legroom, palatial, toe room's good, headroom is pretty decent beneath this panoramic sunroof. You could get someone into the center because it's a relatively wide SUV, this one. We still have that leather running up across these doors here. We've got sunshades, which are part of that option package as well. Map pockets in the seats, air vents, an actual household power point. Love that. Wish we saw that more often. That's good. 4 more USB ports to go along with the 4 in the front. So no one's device is not going to be charged in this car, that's for sure. And then we have a control panel here for climate, but also heated and cooled rear seats, which is a really nice feature. Definitely great for families. That's part of that $4,500 option package. Now, here in the center, flip down armrest as well. So there's not a huge amount to complain about in the back. It's certainly nicely equipped for children or adults. Now, one of the subjective things that I think the Grand Cherokee gets very right is its exterior design. For me, this is how a Grand Cherokee should look. It's how a semi-premium Jeep family SUV should look. It's classically handsome in that American way, especially at the front, but also here at the back. Now, this is the standard color. This is just a flat white color. And I think it looks really nice in Overland trim paired with the white roof, gloss black roof rails, and the silver wheels. It looks handsome to me. A lot more effortless than some other large SUVs out there. Now, coming around the back, you actually don't get a Grand Cherokee badge. That's on the sides, on the doors. What you do get is your 4x4 badge for the Quadra-Trac II system in this car, and an Overland badge so everyone knows you bought the most expensive of the 5-seat configurations. Always good. Now, here we've got a release to open up that electric tailgate, but it's also a kick to open function if you prefer that. The boot door gets out of your way quickly and reveals a huge boot. Now, the capacity is a little bit difficult to pin down. It's about 1,000 litres, Jeep says. Now, I think they might be measuring to the top because it doesn't look like 1,000 litres to me, but it is big, functional, and square. You're going to get plenty of luggage in here. Now, remember, you can get a bigger 7-seat long wheelbase version of the Grand Cherokee, the L, but for those that just want a 5-seater, this is going to be great. Now, opening up this nice solid boot floor here, you've got a temporary space saver spare, like semi-temporary. It's an 18-inch wheel, and the tire is actually a relatively normal size, but it's not technically full size because this car is on 20-inch wheels. Now, the seats do fold 60/40. The big piece is not on the curbside for Australia. That hasn't been converted. And we've got here some storage off to the left. We've got a 12-volt socket, some hooks as well. And then the control is actually down here to close the tailgate, so you don't have to reach too high. So if you're a shorter king or queen, then this SUV is going to be great for you. So at $111,000 drive away, this Grand Cherokee 5-seat Overland as tested is expensive to buy, but it's also expensive to run, and the source of that problem is right here. This is Jeep's 3.6 litre Pentastar V6 petrol. It's been around for 100 years. It's naturally aspirated, non-turbo, and it has some things about it which are quite enjoyable. It's not bad to drive, and it's also quite quick, as we'll see in our performance testing figures in just a minute. But what it also is extremely thirsty. Now, Jeep rates this car for combined fuel consumption of 9.9 litres per 100 Ks, and I'd love to meet the grandmother on her way to church that was able to set that figure, because I've been driving this car normally sedately on my commute for the last week or so, and I've been able to get 16 litres per 100 Ks, which is appalling in the year 2023. Now, Jeep ditched the old diesel and V8 options for this car in previous generation form, which is a bit of a shame because obviously the diesel would deliver a cheaper engine to run, and even a V8 I doubt would use much more fuel than this while delivering much more power and a better sound. Now, at 16 litres per 100 Ks, even on 91 octane petrol, which you're able to use with this car, your annual fuel spend for an average Aussie is going to be somewhere north of $4,000, which is just way more than similar diesel or hybrid SUVs. Something like a Volkswagen Touareg V6 TDI or a Lexus RX 350 hybrid will use half the fuel of this car while delivering similar performance. So that's obviously something to think about and something that Jeep just has to improve moving forward. Now, servicing isn't so bad. The interval is a bit short, 12 months, 12,000 Ks. Most rivals can go 15, but the first 5 services are capped at $399 a piece for a 5-year, 60,000 kilometre price of $1,995. The warranty, again, room for improvement. It's 5 years, but limited to 100,000 Ks. Now, that won't matter for a lot of people, but most rivals give you unlimited Ks. What is going on here? And as for insurance, in the last 12 months, the median budget direct customer spent $1,519 to comprehensively insure a new Jeep Grand Cherokee. Everybody's situation varies, and your premium will vary based on how you garage the car, your driving history, and where you live. Okay, so that's a look at the interior, the packaging, and the running costs of the Grand Cherokee. What's it like to drive? Well, pulling out onto our test track, you can probably hear in the background the soundtrack of that V6 engine, which a lot of people are going to like the sound of because, you know, in this segment, most of the contenders are diesel, which never sound that fantastic, or they're downsized or hybrid petrols. This one is still, you know, the whole hog, still the big V6, the 3.6 litre Pentastar, naturally aspirated petrol V6. We've seen it for years and years. It's making 210 kilowatts of power and just under 340 Newton meters of torque. So decent power, competitive power for this segment, but the torque is well short of what most contenders in this field would be giving you. You know, cars like the Everest, Ford Everest with a 3 litre V6, they're cheaper, making 600 Newton meters of torque, a lot more pulling power. It's part of the reason why the towing rating is not so great for the Grand Cherokee. It's on screen now, it's just over 2,700 kilos. And that's well short of what you'd get from virtually any rival in that sort of towing class, most of which will do the full 3,500 kilos. And that's what the Grand Cherokee would used to do in some specifications, because of course the old one, you had the option of a 3 litre diesel that sort of dated back to when Jeep was part of the same family as Mercedes. And you also had a few V8s, and that's not happening this time around. At the moment, the only engine that's compatible with right-hand drive for the Grand Cherokee is the 3.6, the ye olde 3.6. There is a cool-sounding engine called the Hurricane, which is a part of the Stellantis family in the US. It's a 3 litre twin-turbo straight-6 petrol engine. Kind of hoping that that gets ported across for our use in the Grand Cherokee and other Jeeps because it's got big power, big torque, towing it'd be back up to where it should be. And you know what? I doubt the fuel consumption would really even be any different because it's already so bad with the 3.6 that it's hard to imagine it getting much worse. But the trade-off is a decent noise and crisp performance. So we're just about to run this car through our performance testing here at the track. I'll pop the results on screen now. If I was a betting man, I'd say they'd be somewhere around that 8-second mark, 0 to 100, maybe a little bit quicker. It's nice and crisp. It's pretty quick among big SUVs of this size, but it's definitely not overly athletic to say that much. And of course, the old Grand Cherokee had a Trackhawk model, which was insane. Will we see that sort of thing again on this model? Don't really know. In terms of hybrid, there is a plug-in hybrid coming, which will of course cut fuel consumption massively, which is a good thing. That'll have some all-electric range. And we know that Jeep is working feverishly on all-electric versions of its SUVs, including a sort of Grand Cherokee-sized model, which will be battery electric and will possibly drag this kind of nameplate into the future. So this might be the last time we see a Grand Cherokee with this kind of combustion engine setup. Now, of course, one of the things which is appealing about this car is it does have a proper four-wheel drive system. So we've got the Jeep Quadra-Trac II system here. It's got a 2-speed transfer case with electronic control right here in the cabin, of course. And we have the Quadra Lift air suspension system, which can get real high, 276 millimeters of ground clearance. You run around at about 180 most of the time for aero, but you can jack this thing up almost comically high. Here's a shot of it on screen, and that's going to give you more than a modicum of off-roading ability. These things actually can do it. And if you go for the off-roading package, which this car doesn't have, you get 18-inch wheels. We've got 20s normally. You get all-terrain tires. You get the trail-rated badge, and as you know, that badge means a lot for Jeep. And you know, this Grand Cherokee is actually able to compete with the Everests, with the Land Cruisers of the world in terms of off-roading capability. Now, what about the rest of the experience? Well, that air suspension with adaptive damping, it does deliver a pretty nice, even, relatively cushy and comfortable ride. You don't feel much of the road surface. It feels suitable for an SUV like this. I'm pretty down with the ride of this truckster, if I'm honest. The handling is pretty ponderous, and that starts with loose steering, which just feels largely disconnected to the front wheels. It's a slow steering ratio, and you have to turn the wheel more than you think you will, and at times you have to make additional correction mid-corner because you're just like, oh, I'm not turning enough. The car isn't really understeering. The steering is just slower than you expect. Not a fan of the steering rack. I think it kind of needs fundamentally a retune to get it feeling a bit more natural and a bit more correct. The Ford Everest is one vehicle in this segment that gets steering pretty much right. But, you know, the refinement's decent apart from the engine, which, while it sounds good when you rev it out, when you just need to accelerate a bit, it's a bit sort of moaning Myrtle, always there in the background. You know, you're hearing it. But other sounds, road noise, wind noise, they're nice and subdued, and it's a quiet car, it's relatively relaxing. Apart from the lane keep assist, which doesn't really work, it's meant to be a centering system. It's meant to read the lane markings on the road and sort of prevent you from driving out of the lane accidentally. Most of the time it does nothing. You can't feel it at all, or you can feel absolutely tiny interventions, but then all of a sudden, at times the car will get a false positive from the lane, decide you've departed the lane, and give you a shriek, which if you've got passengers, they think the car's broken. They think you're about to run off the road. You've done nothing wrong. The car's misread the lines, and it just has this really unsubtle reaction. So technologies like that really need a bit of a retune. So at the start of this video, I reminded you that Chasing Cars is independent, owned by Budget Direct Insurance. We get to tell you how it is, and that's why it's clear that the Grand Cherokee Overland is just pitched a little bit too strong in terms of price to buy into it for how good this car is. By all means, it's pretty nice. It feels semi-premium. The driving experience is pretty good, but there's a massive additional layer of polish on a bunch of other rivals in this space. Cars like the Volkswagen Touareg, a recent Mega Test and Gold Star winner here on Chasing Cars, the Audi Q7, the Lexus RX 350 hybrid with enhancement pack. Cars like that show you why they have luxury status. When you sit in them, you feel the materials, you feel the solidity, and you drive them and experience a greater level of refinement that the Jeep simply does not possess at this price. And that's the key, at this price. Now, if you test drive this car and you decide that this matches your preferences, my biggest recommendation would be to buy it in entry-level Night Eagle trim. That costs about $78,000 plus on-road costs, so early 80s drive away, and that's not so bad. It also has a long list of standard features. It still looks really cool outside, so I say save your money, go for the Night Eagle. It isn't too expensive. It's when you start walking up the range to trims like this Overland, inexplicably over 110 grand drive away as tested, where the case for the Grand Cherokee just falls apart. In my opinion, this should be $90,000 drive away tops. If you're keen, you can disagree with me down below in the comments. We'll have a discussion about this, but that's how I feel about it. It's now over to you to give me your feedback. While you're down there, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.